Hello and welcome everybody to lesson 3 of our diploma in mobile app development. So today's lesson is coding for beginners, but before we begin, let's have a look at a quick recap of the last lesson and today's agenda. So I am, as usual, Ushing, your mad educator, and it would be great, guys, as well if you could just type in where you are listening from to make sure that everyone can hear me. Okay, fantastic. So before I forget, you are in with a chance to win a 12-month premium membership, which we will be announcing at the end of lesson 5, and the winner will be chosen randomly from every single person who has attended live so far. So do attend live to be in with a chance to win that 12-month premium membership and join me on the advanced diploma in mobile app development. So only a few more lessons before we get to that lucky prize winner in that competition. And the first 3 parts of the toolkit are free. So after this lesson, the webinar slides, the summary notes will be locked, but you will still be able to access the recordings of each lesson and attend the live lessons. So do not worry about that. And I can see everyone's saying they can hear me perfectly. South Africa popping in, Belgium, they're down there from Ireland saying hello, fantastic stuff. Only down the world, Qatar as well. Brilliant to have you all on board, guys. So today's lesson, well, before we begin, let's do a quick recap as usual. So the last lesson we had a look at who is your audience, and hopefully you all remember why this is extremely important. Well, figuring out how to target your audience early on, it helps you invest your time and resources wisely. Remember your return on investment. As a budding developer, budding mobile app developer, you will want to invest your time and resources carefully. But as you are just starting out, pretty much everything does have a great return, and that return is experience at the moment. So we had a look at a few ways to do this, and I'm not going to run through it now. Just rewatch the lesson if you want to refresh what we went over. Remember, you can access recordings of the lessons by logging into the Shaw Academy website and accessing them through your student areas. So targeting your audience, there's quite a few ways to do that. Next, we had a look at who is your user, figuring out your actual user, and we did this through user personas and really trying to get into the shoes of someone who would be using your app. If we're going to take it all the way back to the first lesson, remember the average user checks their phone 150 times a day. We want to get into the shoes of that average user, figure out who they are and how we can get them to check their phone for our app and use our app. And we saw how this came in extremely useful with our cookery app example. Does everyone remember that example? Well, we had different users, and because we had different users, we could have different iterations, different versions of the cookery app focused on different problems that each user had to have solved. So there could have been vegetarian users, parents, students, people who are into fitness. So rather than trying to have an app that does everything for everyone, and if someone's really into fitness or a parent, maybe they're not going for the vegetarian option. So that might be a bit of a waste to have that in the app. So again, it helps us spend our time and resources wisely. And then finally, we went into a bit more detail with planning our app, followed by our summary and our Q&A at the end as well. So if anybody does have any questions, don't hesitate to get them typing in now. It doesn't seem like there's too many popping in at the moment. So today's lesson is coding for beginners. So first of all, we're going to look at some important concepts in programming to get you learning how to code. Now, what we are going to be using is App Inventor 2. It's a free online resource. To get access to it, just type in App Inventor 2 into your search bar. And I would stress to everyone, just watch and listen for the lesson. So please do watch and listen for the lesson, take down notes, and then follow along with the actual code with the recordings. So the reason we are using App Inventor 2 is that it's to help you get used to the concepts of Java and the Android app development process, and to prepare you for Java and Android Studio, which we will be moving on to in the advanced course. And I have been getting quite a few questions about C#, C++, and other languages out there, and I have found that in my experience that once you learn one language, making the switch to another can be quite quick because you know what you're attempting to do and can find out how to do that very quickly. So it's very important to have a good understanding of Java concepts and the logic behind what you are attempting to achieve, because that will help you out no matter what language you are programming in. So this is really the most important thing. You need to know what you are attempting to do. And while the syntax may change from language to language, the logic and the process behind it will not change too much. So after that, we are going to start adding our design to our app, our user interface, moving on to our blocks of functionality that are going to bring life to our app. And then finally, we're going to have a look at what we can do to add a further functionality to our app, as well as our summary and Q&A at the end. So hopefully you are all quite excited about that and ready to get going with today's lesson. Everyone's saying, fantastic, let's get cracking, brilliant stuff. Michael there saying, let's go. Brilliant stuff, guys, to see you all ready to get started and learning how to code. So as I did mention in the last lesson, I have received a few emails from you guys letting me know you have concerns about learning to code. So I'm happy to tell you again that it is all easier than it has ever been to get started. You don't need a degree or lots of expensive equipment. You can get started right now for free. So I would again tell you guys, if this is your first time coding, first time entering the app world, don't expect your first app to be a world-class professional quality. That does come in time after you've built upon your experience. You do need to enter with the understanding you are going to learn a new skill, and it does take time to become good at a skill. It's the same with any skill that you are trying to learn. So if you are putting in the time, the planning and the dedication, you are going to be able to create valuable apps that will mean a lot to yourself and the people who use them. So you will have plenty of time to make your app what you want it to be. So now remember, everything you learn will help you as a developer. You are gaining experience, and it's a good idea to keep in mind. Again, start simple and work your way up. So first of all, let's get started with identifying the problem. So really this stage should be called identifying the solution. And again, if we look back at our lesson 1, we had a look at the MAD process. And the first step in that was identifying the problem. So the first step is really to figure out what exactly we are attempting to achieve. So the first step is to examine the problem carefully to identify what qualifies as a solution. And a problem may have many different solutions, but they do all have something in common, and this is a requirement. So we may as well start off with an app idea. Now, I was recently at the zoo with my little sister, so I came up with something that we could cover over the coming weeks. So I was thinking it would be, we took some nice pictures as well. You can see the lion, I believe that's a red panda, the tortoise. So I was thinking would be a fun and an interactive way to explore the zoo by having an app that you could check off all the animals that you see as you go along. So turning it into a little sort of game, a little sort of treasure hunt. Now I thought we could also create the app to relay some important information about the animals you see in the zoos, whether it's or wildlife parks or safaris. And what we could do is we could simply display the information, but then the app wouldn't be interactive. We would miss out on engagement. So really, the user should be able to select the animal and also be able to interact and engage with our app. Again, engagement is hugely important, because you do need the user to engage with your app for them to get use out of it. If they don't use your app, it's useless to them, and you want your app to be useful and usable. So this is what the user should be able to do. Be able to select animals and be able to interact and engage with them. Now, there are quite a lot of questions coming in, guys, and we do have quite a bit to get through. So do save them for the Q&A. I'll try and answer as many as we do go through the lesson. But again, we do have quite a bit to get through, so keep that in mind. So first of all, specification. So The second step is then to specify the list of requirements from a technical point of view. Initially, you may start off with multiple solutions, but you're trying to specify what your final app will do. So, does anyone have any good ideas about how this could work and what we could implement for it to make it interactive and engaging for the user? Does anyone have any ideas with that? Very good sounds. They're from Lisa. Very good. Geolocation would not be a bad one at all. Maybe a little map. That's very, very good. Well, if we're going to look at the specification, and this is our sort of minimum viable products or our minimal product for release, we can always add updates and more functionality as we go on. So what we want is we need button interaction. We need the user to be able to interact. We need multiple screens because we want to be able to walk around the zoo and check animals off a list. We need information layout to have that. Display a welcome message welcoming the user to the app, a navigation menu so they know where they are in their app. And there's a lot of very good comments there, having image scanners take pictures of the animals as you go along. Very good. Those are all very good answers. So this is what we sort of want to build, and we'll be working over this over the next week, 2 weeks. So again, this is our minimum viable product that we can build on as we go on. And a minimum viable product, again, we'll be covering that in a lot more detail in the next lesson when we're talking about the application development lifecycle. So development lifecycle is very important, so do attend that lesson. So this is our problem. We've identified our problem, come up with a solution to it. So now we need to learn how to code to implement that solution. So let's take a look at what we'll be coding up. So it's important to keep in mind that computers never sleep. And as I've said, we are going to be using App Inventor to get you introduced to Java concepts and get you started on your Android app development journey, and then also prepare you for using Java and Android Studio in the advanced course. So App Inventor is event driven. It responds to events. So let's take a look at this first block. And what do you guys think it will do? So we have when, and then we have do, which is we've left empty for the time being. And we're going to become very familiar with these blocks over the duration of the course. But what do you think these blocks will do? And one thing that I do quite like about programming and coding is that programming languages, coding languages, are very logical. Once you understand, they generally say what they are going to do. And there is no hidden meanings to a line of code. It tells you exactly what it is going to do, because when you are writing down a line of code, you are passing an instruction to the system, to the computer. So it needs to understand that. So there can be no hidden meanings in an instruction, nothing there that they have to interpret on their own in a certain way. So when you are writing something down, it's telling them literally what to do, the system what to do. So it is very logical, and with a bit of analysis, you can very easily come up with what lines of code are going to do just by thinking about it logically. So very good, a lot of answers coming in. So when our screen 1 initializes, so when we open up our screen, do something. Very good, very good. So there's a huge amount of different events that an app can respond to, that App Inventor can respond to. So when we click a button, do something. When we tip the device, do something. So it's very important to keep that in mind, okay? That you are responding to events, whether that is when the screen is initialized, when the screen is appearing, when a button is clicked, when an accelerometer is shaken, do something. Or even if you received a text. So these are all events triggered. And a good way to see how you can do something when an event is triggered is this little idea that I came up with. I stumbled on the idea of a dice roll app. So you could also do a coin flip app or something similar, but I wanted to do a dice roll app so that I could shake my phone and not have the dice roll off the table. I don't know my own strength, and oftentimes it just flies off the table. So something like this. So when we shake to roll the dice, it will change our number on the screen. So people there saying very good interaction there. When the accelerometer is shaking, do something. So we should probably use the accelerometer block, and it's quite simple to do. When we shake our accelerometer, what we want to do is set the dice roll.text. So dice roll is our label. So this is going to be a label which we will change the text of. So when we shake the accelerometer, set the text of our dice roll label, which we've named dice roll, and I'm going to be talking about giving your variables and what variables are logical names in a minute. To a random integer from 1 to 6. So I'll set it to a random integer from 1 to 6. So think creatively, guys, and this is based on Java. It is a layer of abstraction on Java, and if you do have development experience, this will be familiar to you, but do think about it in the mobile app development context. So it's important to keep this in mind going on. So let's move on with some terminology to get us moving on with today's lesson as well. Let's break everything down and get you introduced to the terminology. So statements. Statements are instructions that direct the operation of the app. These are lines of code. These are what we tell the app what to do. And again, remember, you need to be as explicit as possible with these instructions. The system, the computer, the Android system will not interpret and in fact you cannot even write ambiguous lines of code to tell the system what to do. You need to be very explicit and instruct it how to do it, which is slightly different to just telling it how to do, telling someone what to do. Again, if we want to go back to lesson 1 and we talked about algorithms, you could go tell someone how to boil an egg and they would go off and do that. But we cannot tell the Android system how to boil an egg or how to do something. We need to give it a list of instructions so that it can carry out that task and direct the operation of the app. Good similarity is a program is like a person who already knows how to boil an egg. So we could tell someone to boil an egg and they have those instructions already in them. And that's a program that someone would have had to have written. So statements are instructions that tell the system what to do, and as I said, can be thought of as a line of instructions. So we can see that the first statement tells the system that when the phone is shaken, set the dice roll text to a random integer between 1 and 6. And each block on App Inventor can be thought of as a statement, as they're all instructions to the system to do something. Next, we have comments. Comments are extremely important. Can anyone think why? I'm going to take a very quick drink of water while you're all coming up with the answer for that. Very good, very good. And they tell other coders and programmers, developers what you're attempting to do. They're instructions for yourself. Very good. You've all got a handle on that. So they're lines of text that are not recognized by the computer when the app is running. And the reason that these are so important is for a couple of reasons. First of all, if you are working as part of a team, which is very common, or you're doing open source code or anything like that, you would want others to be able to understand what you are working on straight away. And not spending ages to trying to decipher your code. Not spending too long running through each individual line of code and figuring out what it does and coming to an understanding. It's much easier if you have a comment set here or a comment set here, where you could say this section of code, what it is doing is setting the label dice roll, the text of that to a random integer from 1 to 6, and so on. So it's much better because people are instantly able to jump in, figure out what a section is doing rather than having to decipher it themselves. And then secondly, for yourself, it may not be something you've thought about, but what if you were working on something, decide to shelve it and come back to it in a week, a couple of months later, with fresh eyes? Maybe you've encountered a problem, you need to do a bit of research. Well, you may have forgotten what you were working on, what exactly you were trying to do, what exact line of code you last left on. If you have the code commented, you can jump back into what you were working on with the minimum amount of fuss. And from personal experience, the amount of times I've been working on code, left it and then came back to it and didn't know where I was working on are too many to count. And if I had commented properly, I could read the comment and just have jumped straight back into where I've left. And then there are variable guys. These are very, very important. These are containers for storing data while the app is running in working memory. And we're going to be talking about storing data with apps in lesson 5. So do make sure to attend that lesson. We'll be explaining the difference between variables and persistent data. But just for the time being, if you do not store the data in a variable and you turn off the app, the data in that variable will be lost. So they are containers for storing data temporarily while the app is running in working memory. So here we are initializing a global variable, which we call player, to a blank string, so to nothing. So when we say global, it can be accessed throughout our application. You can also use local variables, which can only be accessed within scope of certain sections of code and certain blocks. But we want this to be accessible by all our blocks of code in App Inventor. So we initialize global variable, which we are calling player, to blank string. So I do see a couple of questions about what the global means, so hopefully I've answered it there for you. So again, this is all based on Java, and we'll introduce you Java concepts that we'll be using throughout the course. And App Inventor is a fantastic tool for learning Java and extremely enjoyable to use, and it will give you a solid foundation in the logic and concepts of programming and mobile app development. So let's talk a bit more about variables, because they are quite important. So there are a huge amount of uses for variables. Anytime you want to store a bit of data, for instance, keeping score, tracking events, and by tracking events, maybe the amount of lives that someone has lost, or how many times they've clicked on a certain button, storing contacts, anything like that. So again, we can initialize a global variable, and these are just example names. We have strings, integers, and booleans. Now they're not very useful for complex data types. And let's just talk about what a string is, an integer, and a boolean. So a string is a bunch of characters together. It's a word, as you can see there. So it's characters. An int is numeric value. So I want to make a quite clear differentiation between a string and int. You can have the character tree in a string, but you couldn't add together two strings that were numbers, in the sense that if you had a string value that was 3 and another string value that was 4, and you said add string 1 and string 2, it would not work, because they are characters, not a numeric value. So an integer value is used for addition and maths and things like that. And then we have Boolean, which is true and false, and I believe they were called after George Boole or someone like that, who came up with Boolean logic way back in the 1800s, I believe. It's been a while since I've gone over that. So Boolean is pretty much just true or false, and it can be very useful, because which we'll be looking at in the next section, very useful what we'll be looking at in the next slide. So variables can store, change, and reuse data. So after notifier, after our text input, set global username to the response. Now, I'm going to be talking about what a notifier is in this lesson, but before we do that, and a notifier is just a little pop-up message, and in this case, it's a little pop-up message asking the user to input their name, and after text input, we have a response, and we set global username to the response. Seems to be making sense. Everyone, if anyone has any questions, as always, don't hesitate to just pop in a question. So variables, it's a bit like algebra to an extent. Very good out there from Ken. A bit like algebra. We can't give x whatever value we want and change the value of x. So decisions. So this is quite important. Has anybody here heard of decision-making statements in programming or control flow statements? We're going to be looking at one today. We'll be looking at other control flow statements in the lessons after, in future lessons. But for today, we're going to be looking at decisions. So variables can be used to make decisions in the app. This is very important because sometimes you want to have your application make a decision depending on a certain statement or a certain input or a certain value that a variable is holding. And to do this, we use if statements. So this is a control flow statement because it directs the flow or controls the flow of execution. So if a condition is true, then run the next statement. So you can say if condition is true. You can also say if a condition is false or if a condition is equal to. So if we had a variable there, which we could have called variable 1 is equal to variable 2, we'll then do something. We could also have not equal, greater than, and less than if we wish. But pretty much if a condition is fulfilled, we'll then run a statement. And then we can add more functionality to it as well using if-else statements. So we can have a response 1 and a response 2. So let's have a look at this in action with an example of traffic lights. And this is quite an important one. And again, it's based around logic and it's something that you would apply, that you yourself do every day. Sometimes you're presented with an option, and if something, well then you are going to take option 1. If something else, you are going to take option 2. And a great example of this is the traffic light example. So if our traffic light is equal to green, well then keep on driving. And then we can add more if statements to it. And we use fantastic. So the extended example of this is if the traffic light is equal to red, then stop. Else if the traffic light is equal to orange, then prepare to stop. Else keep driving. So what we would have is our if traffic light is equal to green, keep driving. Else if traffic light is equal to red, stop. Else if traffic light is equal to orange, then prepare to stop. Otherwise, just keep on driving. Maybe the traffic light's broken in that instance. So it's very good there from Paul, and you have noticed indeed. Now we're using two different colors here. We have blue and green. So blue is for numeric values, while green is for logic. So this is equal, not equal to numbers. Well, this would be logically equal. So equal to false, equal to true, things like that. So if we were doing a maths app or something like that, what we'd use here is a 2 plus 2 example. So if our addition, if we had a variable that held the value of our calculation, so we tried adding 2 plus 2 and we made that equal to variable y. If variable y is equal to 4, well then correct, you got the answer correct. Else you've got it wrong. So these are very powerful and are extremely common, so it's a very good idea to get familiar with them now. How many if statements can you use? Very good question there, Mohammed. You can use as many if-else statements as you wish, but if you are going over 20, you probably need to design the logic of your code better. So let's just have a very quick look at building the user interface, what our app will look like. So this is what the logic and functionality of our app, of our blocks, will interact with and display. So as I mentioned in the last lesson, building prototypes is a great way to keep design focus and stay on point. And losing focus in development can cost time and money, and nobody wants that, because as you all know, time is money. So I would like one more time to stress, the more time you put into planning and structuring your app down to the last teeny detail, the easier development is. So what is required for this? So what is required? Well, first of all, start off with an elevator pitch. An app to enjoy visiting animals in their habitat. How will it be used? Well, we're going to use it to find information on animals. And then features. Well, button interaction, personalized content for the time being. And this is what we're going to do. We are going to create a lovely table there full of animals. And initially these tables are all going to be silhouettes. And then when an animal is clicked, you give you the place where you can find the animal. Once you've found the animal, you can unlock it. So we'll talk about that once we've gotten our very first bit of user interface up and running. So is everyone ready to get cracking with App Inventor 2? Brilliant, everyone's very excited to get going. Fantastic. So I have started a project here, which I have called Zoohoo. So hopefully you've all had a chance to go out and play around with App Inventor, since I mentioned it in the last lesson. If not to worry. So, there's a lot here. What's a good idea is always click connect and connect to your emulator. You can also download an AI companion app, which will allow you to scan a QR code to download the app onto your actual device or a USB. And the emulator that we're currently using, it is the preset one with App Inventor. It is a bit basic. And I, in fact, would always advise, guys, always advise, try and test on a real device. And if you do want to find out more in regards to that, there's a lot in the help in regards to your companion information. And then also, if you want to Google setting up App Inventor. So there are 3 options for you. Build your computer on a project and test with Wi-Fi. Use the emulator, or just use on an Android device with a cable. And I would advise using on a real device. It's quite important. Keep that in mind. So first of all, what do we want to do? Well, we want to click and drag a little start button in to get the user ready to go with the app. So again, click and drag a button in. Now, it's not that nice off to the side. So what you can do is you can click on your screen, and we have 3 different views here. We have our palette of components that we can use, a viewer for what's actually displayed, the components that we're currently using, and then the properties of each of those components. And now there's a lot of components there, guys, and the properties of each of those components does change depending on what they are. And then we have our blocks view, which we'll be going into a minute. For the time being, how about we center this and center that a bit more. And then as well, for the button itself, why don't we make it a bit rounded, a little bit less harsh. And then the text, what we can do is we can just call it start. So immediately the user will be prompted when they open up the app to start. And for the time being, let's as well just keep the screen orientation in portrait. And again, guys, it's very important to always rename with logical sounding names. So we're going to call this start button. So the reason we do this is for quite a simple one. If you had 20 buttons, or you had a lot of different images or checkboxes or password text, well, maybe not password text boxes, but text boxes, or a lot of different buttons, whatever it may be, you could get into the issue that it's hard to find your buttons. So it's always a good idea to give them logical names, so that when you're in your block view or when you're coding or anything like that, you're very, very it's very simple for you to remember that you've called the start button, rather than going, wait, was that button 1 or was it button 5 or button 2 or button 6, which can get quite confusing. And again, you don't want to be clicking back and forth. Just cut down on hassle for yourself. So fantastic stuff. So we do have quite a bit to get through, guys, and I don't want to keep you too long for today's lesson. So I'm going to boot through this, and then I will get through the questions in the Q&A if that is okay. Oh. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to have our table view. So we do want to click and drag in our table view, and we can do that here. So our table arrangement. Again, we only have one table arrangement for the screen, but we don't need to change it too much. So what we want to do is we want to add some images to this, the images that we will be using. I do apologize, we do not want to use images. What we want to use is we want to use buttons, because they will be clickable. We want to use buttons. But we can set the image of the buttons quite easily. There are 4 buttons for our 4 animals. So again, what might be an idea is get rid of the text. We don't need any text on these because they will be self-explanatory as we go on. So now we want to add some images to those buttons, and then we'll rename the buttons afterwards. So let's click on button 1. And set our images. So what we could do is we can go to image, upload file, choose file, and there we go. So we want a bear first of all. Okay. And then we want to upload a couple other files as well. Fox. I like that color of fox. And this is where having graphic design skills comes in very useful. All of these images were done by our graphic design educator, Kevin. Which makes it quite a bit easier. I apologize, I'm going to upload. The fox for some reason didn't upload, and we can see all of them down there at the bottom. So again, you can cut down the amount of work that you're going to have to outsource by having that graphic design background. So all of these have been uploaded. Let's set the width to 150 of each of these, just to make them nice and easy. Perfect. So we want to change them to be all just nice and regular there. And you can set them to percent if you wish. And so let's put this as our rhino. Another button, and we're going to rename these buttons as well and give them logical names. So that again, when we're in our code, we can go find these names quite easily. Rather than scratching our head trying to figure out which button was which. So we should change this image as well to our fox, and then this image to our elephant. So we're going to be working on unlocking them in the next lesson, but first of all, let's just get this interaction with the users going. First of all, let's just get this interaction with the user, engaging with the user, and getting them inputting their name, things like that. So button 1 is our bear button. Perfect. Button 2, rhino button. So again, you can see how renaming the variables makes it a lot easier. Fox button. And then our button. Is everyone following along with that? Okay, so we're just working on the user interface at the moment. Don't worry, we're going to be going into the blocks view and adding functionality to this, and then also getting it up and running on our emulator. So We have added all of that. Now, what we do want is when the user opens the app, we want to engage with them, guys. It's all about interacting with the user, getting the user to interact with your app and engaging with them in just small ways, which can really make a big difference. So what we want to do is we want to have notifiers. So again, guys, it's well worth your time clicking through all of that. As you can see, there's information on everything and what they do. So if you are ever stuck on information on what they do, so a notifier, and there's a lot of options there. It displays alert messages and alert dialogues, messages, and temporary alerts. So little pop-ups. So we do want to drag this in. It's a non-visible component because it will only pop up in response to an action. So what we want is we will call this name notifier, or just call it Zoohoo screen 1. Call that screen 1 notifier. So what we want is when we open up our screen, do we want all of these to be immediately displayed? I think it might be an idea to, first of all, have the notifier popping up to ask the user name, and then they do have to click the start button to make this table arrangement appear. So what we can do is we can make that invisible, so they will have to click the start button to initialize the screen. So let's get going with our blocks and get that all coded up before looking at what our next steps should be and how we should go with that next. So first of all, we want to initialize a variable. So we're going to initialize a variable to hold our player name. So we're going to initialize that to text. So these are all of the different built-in blocks. So we've control, logic, math, text, list, and then different components as well, and we'll see them all in use. Again, it's the same with any software. Any software you will be using in coding, anything like that, it does take time to become familiar with the interface, different options, and how to use them. So we've initialized our global player to none. So the next thing that we want to do is that when our screen is initialized, so when screen 1 is initialized, we want our pop-up asking the user who they are. So we can call our notifier by calling notifier and show text dialog cancelable false, because we want them to have to answer their name. And then we can just have it the message being, please enter your name. Please enter your name and a little title. Who are you? So this has popped up. Now after they have entered that and clicked OK, which you'll see in a minute, we do want to have something. So after text input, we want to set our global player to our response. So we want to get our response there. So these are control blocks because they do something when an event happens. So we've done all that. Now what might be an idea as well is to actually make our table arrangement visible. So when our start button is clicked, what we can do is set table arrangement visible to true, as you can see there. Now we've set our table arrangement visible to true. Now we want to work on our other screen. So we actually want to be able to, if we go back to, we'll display the hidden components, click on our bear and bring us to a new screen. So we do need to add a new screen, and we'll call this bear screen. And the way we can do that is if we go back to screen 1, we go to our blocks. When bear button dot click, what we want to do is open As you can see, there's a huge amount of options for each of these values. We want to open up another screen with the start value with a start value. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be passing the user's name to the next screen. So that'll display it again, interacting with them, engaging with them on a good level rather than displaying the user's name. Again, just another level of engagement when they're working with it. So open up another screen. So we have our screen name and our start value. Those are the two parameters. And our screen name is bear screen. This is something to keep in mind. When you are naming your screen and when you're typing them down here, that is not the same as that. It is character specific. Again, a lower and uppercase matter, and then also spaces matter as well. They're very, very important, as you can see. That will not be the same as what we've named it up here. And even if you do decide to name your screens 1, 2, and 3, you will need to make sure that they're named the exact same. And then what we want is our global player. With our global player. So we've opened up a new screen. Let's go back and work on our new screen, which is going to be quite simple. We're going to have our bare screen, and there's not going to be a huge amount to it. What we're going to do is have an image at the top, which is going to be our bare image, and again we want to center everything just to make it look a bit nicer. This picture will be our bear. And then what we want to do is have a label and then a long label as well. So we're going to have a label, and doesn't matter about that, and we'll rename this user label because we are going to change this to a nice little personalized message for the user. Label 2, we could have quite a long description for our bear, and would be an idea when working with App Inventor, again with other resources as well, typing it out in a Word document so you can copy and paste things in. So this could be quite a long description of a bear, the different types of bear, where they can be found, and why you should stay away from them. Do not feed. Something like that. Now, if we put that in, as you can see, it's a bit of a long label. So the way we can get around that is we could set our percent to say 50. That'll be our height. 50 is quite a bit, so let's set our height to 100. And if we want to set our width, we could set it to 50. Might be an okay width. Now, that doesn't look the nicest, but what we can do is we can also center our text, and it looks a bit better. Maybe make the font for this one a bit bigger to make it stand out. That's a bit too big. Let's say 16. Perfect. And we can change the font of this. There's a few different options there. Font face, sans serif, and so on. We'll go with the default anyway. We do have just a very tiny little bit to do. So what we want to do when we open up the screen is change our first label, the bear label, to something different. So when our bear screen dot initialized, what we want to do is we want to set our username label, our text of this, and then we can use our text. We want to join a couple of strings. And the way we want to do this is we want to say look out, and then we'll have our username, and what we can do to do that is we can go to our control, get our start value, and we want to add another string here. Have space, look out, a bear. Perfect. And then as well, when our bear screen dot back is pressed, What we can do is we can close our screen. So, perfect stuff. So we can close our screen there and we'll be back in the first screen. So if we want to run this, and it's always a good idea to go back to screen 1, if we do want to run this on our emulator, we will be asked to input a name. And now, something to keep in mind with the emulator and why it can be better to work with a device is because each time you add blocks of code, it will add things like that. So if we click start, we have our bear options there. And then if we click our option there, it'll bring us to our page. Tell me, look, I'm rushing a bear. And this could be quite a long description. Now, everyone's following along okay with that. We still do have just a little bit more to get through. Do apologize for that. So let's take a look at what the next steps are. Does anyone else have any ideas what else we could do for this? I'm going to take a very quick drink of water while you get asking that. So what else will we do? Very good. Geolocation, unlock the animals. Brilliant. Well, that is actually add sounds. That's quite a good one as well. But this is one of the things that we will be doing. QR scanner. We'll be adding a treasure hunt element to it. And more animals and more interactions. So the way this is going to work is we're going to add a QR scanner, which is one of the components in App Inventor. And what we're going to do is imagine that if you're in a zoo and there was barcodes beside each enclosure, and when you clicked on the barcode, scanned it, you unlocked these animals. And then at the end, maybe have a little reward for yourself if you've unlocked all of the animals. So that is today's lesson, guys. I do hope you've enjoyed it. So our weekly challenge number 1 from last week was why would someone want to download and use your app? And we had a huge amount of options from that. So this week is do post your elevator pitch. Go to Shaw Academy's Facebook page, use hashtag ShawMadApp and tell us your elevator pitch, and search ShawMadApp to find past examples. A very quick summary. So we had a look at variables and decisions. Remember, variables are containers for data, and decisions are control flow statements. They control the flow of execution, and they're very, very important. And we sort of work through them in day-to-day life as well. If I'm hungry, I'll eat some food. If not, maybe a cup of tea will do. And we had a look at implementing our app design with the user interface and creating events. And again, guys, in regards to that, there is a lot. It does take a while to become familiar with the software itself. So do play with it and keep on playing it as well. It does take time and practice. So congratulations, you've just taken the next step in Android app development. Do attend the lessons live to ask questions in real time and benefit the most, and I am here to help. So email me at mobile.app@shawacademy.com. So the next session is the development life cycle. So we'll be looking at what is a development life cycle, and this is a very important lesson, guys, so do attend live. And we'll be looking at the iterative process, again, learn to code and adding more functionality to our app. So attend all of the lessons live and your knowledge will grow. So I will see you back for lesson 4, the development life cycle. Now it is time for a quick Q&A. So I'm going to take a very quick drink of water. So how do we store the variable input so we don't have to input the name every time we start the app? We'll be working with storing data with apps in lesson 5, so be sure to attend that. Why do you prefer Java over other languages? I prefer Java because it is the most popular programming language in the world. It's the one I am most familiar with. Again, if you learn Java, it's the same. I got told when I was first starting out to code, learning Java is very much like learning how to program and code. It's very similar to learning how to drive. You don't learn how to drive a specific type of car, specific make and model. No one learns how to drive specifically a Toyota Corolla, a Nissan Micra, and is unable to drive any other cars. When you learn how to program, how to code, you are learning how to drive, and you can apply what you've learned to other languages as well. I just prefer Java because it is the most popular language in the world, but I am quite fond of Swift as well, and I have been sort of getting up to speed on Kotlin recently. But learning Java, you'll know a lot about a lot of other languages as well. Will any lessons covering the purchase type apps? We'll be covering all of that in lesson 7. So do not worry there, Lauren, about that. We will be covering all of that in lesson 7, making money in mobile. Is it better to use App Inventor on your PC or on your phone? Well, it is browser based, so you can use it on your tablet or on your PC, but I would advise using it on your PC. You have a larger screen, you can test it on your phone, you can test it on the emulator a lot easily. So how do you get it on a device rather than an emulator without publishing the app? So very simply, if we want to go back here, when we click on connect, there is the option to connect via USB. It's thought Notify was non-visible. Notify is non-visible because it's not displayed all the time. I was dragging stuff out from a list there as well. The animals will be on screen too. Well, the specific animals will be on screen too. Do use the emulator if you wish, guys. I would in fact advise connecting via USB. It's much better and much more responsive, and overall testing on real devices is a lot better for a variety of reasons, because you are simulating real world conditions instead of emulated conditions. While they can be very, very close to the real thing, are no substitute for the real thing. So guys, I have kept you here long enough. Do email me at mobile.app@shawacademy.com if you have any remaining questions. I do apologize, we had quite a bit to get through in the lesson, and I don't want to keep you here over long. So I'll see you back for lesson 4, the development lifecycle. And as I said, any questions, just get in contact with me at mobile.app@shawacademy.com. Until then.